Welcome to the broadcast tonight. Conductor James Levine will be here with a preview of the Metropolitan Opera's opening night. Also, Yale Law Professor Stephen Carter defines a growing intolerance towards the affairs of God. We begin with this. A singing debut at the Metropolitan Opera announces to the world that an artist of supreme talent has emerged. 25 years ago, both Placido, Domingo, and Luciano Pavarotti debuted at the Met. To celebrate this anniversary, on Monday night, Met Artistic Director James Levine will conduct the Met's gala opening night with performances by these two giants of the classical musical world. I'm delighted to welcome James Levine, the driving force behind the Met, back to this table, and it's always a pleasure to have him here, and especially on the eve of a new season. Welcome.
Thanks, Charlie. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Tell me how momentous and significant this is to have these two great artists there for it.
It's momentous indeed, because it's not just that these are two great artists, two great artists, but they happen coincidentally to have their 25th Met anniversary in the same season, which means having them together brings lots of excitement and also lots of emotion, because for the first time in anyone's memory, here we have two great tenors in their middle 50s, and we don't see within the framework of their repertoire tenors in the younger decades coming behind them, which means it's not only a celebration, but it's also a moment's pause.
Is it just repertoire, or is it talent too?
Well, who knows? One really does have to say, I think it's very important for people to understand that these two artists are not just great artists, great tenors, but they have come along at a time in which the artistic burden on them is quite different than that on their predecessors, for two reasons. Their predecessors came at a time when there were more of them at once, and when the business of having an international career was not the kind of constant international exposure that it is today. And when you consider that these guys have been singing, well, just at the Met, for example, continuously, a tremendous wide variety of repertoire in great depth, hundreds of performances I've done with both of them over the 20 years since I came, but in the Met for 25 years. I think to have them is artistically thrilling beyond belief, but to have them at the same moment and to be able to savor that and all of its nostalgia, and at the same time all of its questions about the future, makes it a very unusual, singular opening night.
Well, I'm going to give you a towel, because you normally have a towel. I'll give you a perspire a little bit there.
Thank you.
And it's almost classic with you to see the towel on.
I know. I didn't come from rehearsal, so I didn't wear it.
That's right. You didn't come. Is it probably they shouldn't sing together very often, because it is such a special time?
Well, that's of course true, but also they don't forget that although they are really they're as different as two singers of the same voice range
then
could
explain
be.
Me how.
How what?
How they're so different.
Oh, they're very, very different. First of all singers are different, but if we consider their only real similarity is that they sing some of the same roles, but they go off in completely different directions from one another, and they come from completely different artistic sources and points of view and balances in their makeup and in their talent and in their temperament. And of course, the repertoire doesn't really allow much for pieces in which there are real parts for both of them. So yes, I think it will be a very unusual thing to hear them both at the same time. Both on the same night in the same place.
Yeah. What are they going to sing?
Well, one of the things about this particular opening night, which seemed to appeal to everyone concerned, was essentially they're going to sing things they have not yet sung on the stage of the Met. Placido Domingo is going to sing the first act of Die Walküre, which he has sung on stage in Vienna, but not yet in New York. And a couple of years ago, Luciano Pavarotti sang Otello in concert performances, but he's never sung it on the stage, and he's going to sing the first act of this opera. And then we're going to finish with a nice act from an opera that features important things that they've both sung and that they can both do.
But you won't tell us.
Well, this will be a lot of fun, and I mean, any opera lover who looks at the program can figure this out, but I think most of the audience will have great fun with it. We've had fun rehearsing it.
Tell me about the opera season coming up for the Met.
Well, this year we have a very exciting season because we're playing 3 new works for the Met. I mean, 3 works that the Met has never had in its repertoire. Partly sparked...
Are these contemporary operas that
No.
have just never been in their repertoire?
No, they're not, as it happens. 2 of them are early Verdi works, one with Mr. Domingo, one with Mr. Pavarotti, and wonderful casts. And the fact that it was their 25th anniversary caused me to go to them and say, is there a lesser-known Verdi work you would like to sing? And they chose different ones, and we're going to put these operas on, Lombardi and Stifelio. They're really sensational bolts of energy and vitality, and from Verdi's youth, they show not only what kind of tradition he was coming from, but they also show where he was going to his mature masterpieces. We're also playing, for the very first time in the Met's history, a masterpiece by Dvorak called Rusalka. But in the 20th century vein, we're playing a new production of Britten's Death in Venice, which we played in the 70s, and a revival of our production of Poulenc's Dialogues of the Carmelites, which is, again, 2 works from composers who just began in the second half of this century with these pieces. And what we basically try to do with our repertoire, of course, and for the future, I mean, as we're heading toward not just the end of a decade, but the end of a century and the end of a millennium, it's very, very important to me that we not just add new works, but that we repeat them and play them again and televise them and tour them so that there's a possibility of them coming more into the center of the repertoire. And fortunately, this really is happening. And because to do a Met production is so expensive and so complicated, what we've tended to do, instead of doing too many at once and having to throw them away or not being able to improve them, little by little, I mean, a piece like the Carmelites has now got a very big following in our house, and I hope the same will be true for the second production of Death in Venice. And of course, each year we carry some works over from the previous year and add new ones. This year is striking, though, for having 3 new non-20th century works that the Met had never had before.
Kind of interesting that a composer can find his work in terms of how much exposure it gets, developing an appreciative audience and having it gain in its hold on an audience and its popularity, just depending on how many talented composers have decided to make it important.
Yeah, and also how much the artists, that is, the conductors, the directors, the singers, get interested in the pieces and want to do them, controls a great deal how these pieces stay in front of the public. And it's just been desperately important to me over the years that I've been at the Met, but in the coming years, that we really go toward that time milestone we're facing in the healthiest state and with the deepest possible artistic vision. And I know nowadays there's a lot of thrashing around over this. There's a lot of people trying this and trying that and sort of, you know, as long as it's new. And I think this, for a company like the Met, is a mistake because we have such a balance of artistic substance, such a balance of artistic visions to fulfill that we can't really go at it except deeply in detail, rather than try this and throw it away if it isn't good.
Have you ever had to convince a great singer that this is a role that he or she should try?
Oh, sure.
Because you hear stories of agents, for example, saying to their, you know, in a very different way, a different relationship, you ought to do this, you need to do this, you ought to do that, and convincing them when the artist or the actor, or in your case the singer, says, it's not me, I don't want to do it. Give me.
This subject is fascinating because, of course, I have a deep feeling that you cannot and you should not twist an artist's arm when you can tell that they really know, when they know this work and they know themselves and they know it's wrong, and I don't twist their arm. But there come times when the conductor or the director may have a real idea of something because it happened with me. I may know the singer very well and the work very well. And then I try to say to the singer, look, have a careful look at this. Study this carefully. Don't reject it out of hand. Sometimes